Okay, let's start. Hey everyone, it's Gio here, Best Bubble Dev, and Krish, the expert of APIs. So he's gonna help us figure out how to connect different types of APIs to Bubble, and also we're gonna demonstrate a couple of examples throughout the video courses or whatever we're gonna do, like sections that on the APIs. So first of all, you have to install the API connector. Install. Now you're ready to connect to any type of APIs. And for this video example, we're gonna use Chuck Norris Jokes API, and I'll let Krish take it from here.
Hey, what's up? So the reason why we took this particular API was because it's fun and just wanted to explore some interesting aspects. Wanted to take this particular section one at a time. So I think this is the most easiest aspect of the API that we'll be looking at today. So let's get started. Okay. API name. So what I'm going to do is I will not explain what APIs are, what different authentications are, what headers and parameters are. Of course, I will explain, but in the context of this particular application, so that you know exactly what to use when you need to use an API under a particular situation.
Okay.
Of course, the things that I'm not covering here will get covered in subsequent videos or subsequent applications that we take up. Okay, so that said, yep, thanks, Gio. You got the name of that, Chuck Norris API, authentication. So this is one of those most important aspects of API while working with API. Let's look at the first one, none or self-handle, pretty self-explanatory. It needs no authentication, which means there is an API and all you have to do is make the API call. We'll see in a bit how to make the API call from Bubble. So all you have to do is make the API call and it'll just go through because it does not need an authentication. Second one, a private key and URL. Private key is equivalent to a password. For simplicity's sake, let's just consider it as a passcode or a password. In this instance, in this particular option that you see there, the passcode or the private key is sent in form of a data through the URL. It's as simple as that, which means if you look at the URL, you would see your passcode or private key there.
Krish, I remember I asked you this last time, like whenever there is private key included, it's hashing on its own, right? Or it's encoding.
Yes, there will definitely be some form of hashing involved.
But we don't have to do anything on our own.
We don't have to do anything. We just pick the private key and we put it in the URL.
Gotcha.
Okay. So that's the second one. The third one is private key and header. Well, not a lot different from the URL, but it's just that the private key or the passcode is not in the URL, but it is in form of a header, which means when I'm executing a request, it would be part of a section where I would send the private key in form of a key value pair. If it sounds complicated, definitely go into it.
Krish, does it mean this part here?
Yes, it's something like that, but specifically not this one. In fact, it would go to, if you go hit the expand button on the so
actual
there you see
header, right?
Correct. So if you click on that, that's where you could enter the private key and the value. That is only if you have to.
Okay, let's not. Yeah.
Let's stay focused. This in one of the subsequent videos. Correct.
Yeah. What's HTTP basically?
Yeah, so that's very similar to a username password. Typically, when you're logging into an application, you would enter your username and password. Likewise, if it's an API, there are mechanisms to send your username and password for a very basic authentication. That's what this means. Again, there are different ways of doing it. We will look at those aspects when we handle this particular situation in a subsequent video.
Cool. What about the Auth2?
So Auth2, password, and user agent and custom token are all associated to, well, there is a difference between each of those. We will not go into depth of each of those. But at a high level, Auth2 is specifically used for social media. Well, I'll take a step back. It is meant for logging in via social media. Typically, you've seen on websites that have things like, okay, sign in via Google, sign in via Twitter, or sign in via LinkedIn and stuff like that. So that basically uses Auth2 in the backend. So basically, using a social media account or authentication to log into your application. This is one of those new techniques that have come up, and it's pretty handy, pretty helpful. It kind of makes it completely application agnostic.
Exactly.
Cool.
That's right.
So we'll go over these. In fact, there are a lot of use cases around this area in work today. So we'll probably spend some time in this, some time on this whenever we get to that point. Okay, this is my favorite, JSON web token. JSON web token is a pretty interesting area and one of those latest techniques of authentication, primarily because it is actually very difficult to crack a JSON web token. So the JWTs, in short, are an encrypted string of credentials together that is sent as a parameter in the URL to the target.
I didn't get it.
But don't worry, we'll go over it. Just to say another sentence, it is more like, let's say you have your IP address, you have your machine serial number, you have your machine name, you have your operating system. So all these together are combined and hashed into a string.
Oh, so you can use even the IP address and everything just to whether or not get access to something, right?
Correct.
Wow.
So now you will actually have, I don't remember how many bit the JWTs are, but it's a big string created via a specific hashing algorithm like the SHA-256, or mostly I think SHA-256, using that. So now this particular string is sent for authentication. So when you are making a request, the string is sent to the server, and the server decodes it and ensures that, okay, this is exactly what I have in my database. Cool, I will give you access. So it's just it's just a mechanism to authenticate.
All right.
Pretty interesting. We'll look into it when we get to that point.
Cool. That's very cool.
Yeah. So client-side SSL certificate is something very similar to what we have in our URL. Typically, if you take your mouse pointer right, so that's basically an HTTPS connection. HTTP secure socket layer connection. In this case, so in this situation, so a certificate is exchanged between the initiator, which is the guy who's initiating the API call, with exchange with the server who's supposed to receive the API call. So this certificate exchange authenticates the entire process. So let's just keep it there. It could get a little complicated for now. We will get to it when we look at the API in specific or in action in an eventual video.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Awesome. Okay, so now that we got authentication out of the way, we have two other parameters there: add a shared header, add a shared parameter. We'll not look at that right now because for this particular use case, we don't need it. Hence, we'll just keep it away for now. Let's keep it simple, baby steps.
All right.
Okay, so this is the interesting part. So you've got an API called Gio. Let's go ahead and put an interesting name there so that you know what it is.
Random Chuck joke.
Random Chuck jokes. Hey, you know what? I think he's a pretty renowned martial artist, so let's give him a good name.
Oh, okay. What do you want to name it?
Let's give him Random Chuck Norris jokes rather than a Chuck jokes.
Chuck Norris jokes.
Okay, cool.
Joke. Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a meaningful name there. Use as data and action API. So if you click on that, there are two options: data and action. I think data is specifically okay. Gio, you might be. I might need your help to assist me here, but at a high level, data is specifically to retrieve information from the external API, and action is when you actually have to create something using the Bubbles backend or Bubble workflow.
Yeah.
Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. To the best of my knowledge, that's the only thing at the moment, but we're still exploring, and maybe if there is something else we're going to add in the future. But basically at the moment, data is you just get the data from the API and that's it. But if you want to include like workflow activities on the API, then you use the action so that you see it in the workflow, so that like you can initiate the API call on a trigger. And trigger is like either a page load or click on something, or if the conditional is met and stuff like that. So I think we can just keep with the data at the moment, and then we can just have another examples in the future that we're going to demonstrate what's the actual difference between data and the action.
Yeah, makes sense. So we've got the use case there, and okay, this is pretty interesting. This is basically the data type. That is, how would you expect the response in? Should it be JSON? Should it be an XML? Should it be an image, a number, text, file, MD? So there are a bunch of responses, and the most common ones typically we use for API responses, is the JSON, unless the API needs a number or an image or a file for that matter.
Yeah.
So for this particular use case, we'll keep that as JSON, and I'll tell you why we need JSON here. Okay. Could we head over to Chuck Norris?
Krish, may I ask you one question before we proceed? So to choose whether it's JSON, XML, or image or whatever, is it gonna be displayed or be shown in the API doc file, like actual, or how would I know what to expect from the API?
Yeah, that's exactly that. That's exactly what we'll talk about now. So Gio, if you could take me to your third tab on the browser, which is
this one?
Chuck Norris. Yeah, that's the one. Okay, so this is the API, api.chucknorris.io, and it's pretty funky. I would recommend you all to play around with it if you're interested. Okay, so let's look at the first one. Retrieve a random Chuck joke in JSON format. Yeah, so Gio, you see that? In JSON format. So that's an indication that in Bubble, on that particular string, we would look for JSON. And it's pretty clear here because that's how they are referencing it. Yeah, did that answer your question?
Yeah, exactly. That's what my main concern was.
So to give you more info, typically this information would be found in the API documentation or the spec. If you go through that, it will give you enough information to decide whether to use a JSON call or an XML, not a JSON call, but expect a JSON response or an XML response for that matter.
Okay.
Okay.
Gotcha. Should I copy this?
Yes, let's go ahead and copy that.
And this probably goes here, right?
And that goes over here.
And basically, yeah, Krish, I think we should touch a little bit on this as well. What's the difference between all these calls or methods?
Sure.
Sure. These are called methods, right, or calls?
That's right. These are called methods, yeah. So, Gio, if you could okay, I'll just quickly explain this and I'll tell you why are we choosing get here. So these are the pretty much most well-known HTTP methods or HTTP functions that usually an API implements. So the first one, get. Get, pretty self-explanatory. Get means I'm trying to get something. So whenever an API is executed with the get method, I would expect the API to only retrieve information from the target. Post. Typically, we associate the word post when we have to go post something, when we have to go send something, when we have to create something. So just for the sense of reference, post is a method you would execute or invoke an API with only when you have to go create something on the web server, create a new resource on the web server.
Krish, does it mean in case we had this API worked in a way that it allowed me to create a new Chuck Norris joke? Is it good example?
Yep, that's a good example. So if you had the authority to create a new Chuck Norris joke, you would probably use a post.
Gotcha. What's put then?
But correct. But again, that needs to get implemented in the API. If the API has support for a post, only then you'd be able to do it. But yes, you got the concept.
I get it. So what's put?
So put is very similar to post, just that put you can use a put method to go ahead and modify an existing resource on the web server. It is very similar to post where you send something.
So but it's like, just to interrupt you, like I apologize, but like whatever we have in the workflows, like post would be like similar to create a thing in the database, and put would be make a change in the database, right?
Put could be used to make a change in the database, or you could also create something new. With put, you can do that as well.
So now, I have a question there. What, like if both of these can create something, why would I, like, in terms of like creation something new in the database, Is there any difference?
Well, no, there is no difference from the creation and the database point of view. It's just a matter of how the API is implemented. Now, there are places, there are APIs, there are developers who prefers to implement post over put, in which case it would be called out specifically in the reference document to use a post request. There are implementations I have seen where people use put. Of course, there are far more implications between post and put, but for now, I think we can just keep it to how it is implemented in the API.
Awesome.
Typically if you execute post too frequently, I mean too often within a span of time, you may run into issues. Whereas if you're running put too frequently, you may not. I mean, it's just a matter of implementation. There is a very subtle difference between the two. We will explain that using an example in one of the subsequent videos when it's going to be really clear. We would probably take a video and take a scenario and run a post and a put to see how it differentiates. But for now, I think let's just keep it that to avoid any issues. Okay, so patch. Typically we use patch to modify a particular record. If you have to go ahead and change something in a record on the web server, that's when you use a patch. Very similar, but using patch, you cannot create anything new. It's for an existing record specifically.
Yeah, now I'm a little bit confused because like post creates stuff, patch makes the changes, put does both of these. So why do I need like post and patch? Now I'm kind of...
There are subtle differences, Gio. I think it would be best to do it using an example, using a scenario.
Yeah,
for now,
sure.
I'm just explaining what the main points are. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And
So
delete, I guess
delete
it makes sense. Right?
Self-explanatory. It just goes ahead and deletes a particular record in the system. Okay.
And I think we don't need anything else at the moment, correct? Or do we need anything?
I'll just quickly touch upon that using square brackets for parameters.
Okay.
It is just to let you know that in case the API has parameters, you could use square brackets for the parameter in this string.
In here?
That's right.
Okay.
That's what it means. But okay, I have not tried it. I haven't played with it. So I'll have to try it out to see how it works. Typically, parameters go in form of question marks and ampersands and a key value pair. But anyways, we'll figure that out.
Yeah. All right. And do we skip all of this, right?
I'll tell you why we are skipping this. Let's go to the document. When I said document, yeah. Okay, so we chose get in the API call, and that is because yes, exactly. It specifically tells me to use a get request. And what you see there, that's a sample JSON response that the the API is expected to return. Okay, so with all that said, if you go back to the bubble screen, there is really nothing that's needed. We'll keep add headers empty because the reference document doesn't want me to add anything. Neither does it need any parameters. So we'll just keep it as is. And let's just hit initialize call. Initialize call is pretty well known. Once you initialize call, it's going to do the first call to the API and retrieve the first set of information. And like you see, the API call was success. It retrieved, created, add. I think that it pulled in a bunch of parameters. Just for the sake of this example, could you hit show raw data as well? Yeah. So that's how the actual response looks like. Pretty interesting. Now, for the sake of this example, should we just go ahead and save these information?
So I think now it's time to go and do stuff on the front end, right?
Right.
So I'm gonna get a text. No, first I think I have to get a group because it gives us a lot of information. It doesn't return only one thing. Actually, that's interesting how it's gonna work out because it returns. Krish, if I click on reinitialize, is it gonna screw up anything? Nothing, right?
No, it will not. Just go ahead.
So I just want to say that like it returns like created at icon, ID, updated it, URL, and I think we just need the value. Is it correct? So yeah,
That's
how
correct.
to
We
roundhouse
just need the
kick.
value for the API. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna give it a try and just do a group and then try to, if I can get just the value, and if not, then I'll try to ignore all of this. So ignore is like,
Okay.
you would just get the only the ID or only the value or only URL, whatever you just need, right? So you could ignore any of this stuff. And also if it gave us back or got us wrong types. So imagine like if value was an image and it says text here, you can just change it to an image or whatever it might be, right? So let's save it right here and go to group joke, and I think it has to be random Chuck Norris joke, and the data would be get data from external API, and API provider is Chuck Norris API random joke. And I think we're all set here, except for we just need the text, which would be here, and it's insert dynamic data, parent groups, jokes. So see, all of these are generated in here. Like if I ignore any of those fields, it won't be shown in here. Probably this affects some performance, like more values or more fields you have here. Maybe it takes a little more time to fetch the data, but anyway, that's something we might explore in the future videos, right? So at the moment we just need the value because that's a joke, and I think I'll just preview it, and that's it. Yeah, Chuck Norris uses hand sanitizer as eye drops. If I refresh it, it will generate another one because it's the random one. So yeah, so this is like very simple example how you can get started with APIs and how you can get the basic taste of it. And then later on, I think once you master APIs, the whole new world is being opened up towards your like whatever, right? Like it's the ocean of opportunities. Whatever you want to do, you can just simply go ahead and do it. I think that's it for this video, and then we can just come back in the future examples how to use all this other stuff that's in the API connector, right? And then we'll probably do like specific examples of how to do like more complex API stuff. But first we're gonna cover all of this here. Krish, you want to add anything?
No, I think that's pretty much it. You pretty much covered most of it. The complex part, we'll keep it for a use case. See, the thing is, it's sometimes difficult to explain these aspects just by talking about it. It's probably far easier to explain with a scenario and doing it live. So I think we'll get to the details with a live scenario in one of the subsequent ones.
All right, Krish, thank you so much. And hey, guys, see you in the future videos. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.